In the far future, after centuries of galactic exploration, humanity discovered a forbidden planet, Ravkar, classified as a Level 17 Deathworld, where even the most ferocious civilizations dared not set foot. The Interstellar Exploration Council chamber fell silent as Commander Eliza Vorn finished her briefing. Holographic projections of Ravkar rotated in the center of the room, its surface a swirling mass of deep greens, blood reds, and obsidian blacks that seemed to shift even as they watched. "This is beyond any standard protocol," said Director Halloway, his lined face pale in the blue light of the chamber. "Every probe we've sent has been destroyed within minutes. The atmospheric composition alone would dissolve human tissue in seconds. Why are we even considering a manned mission?" Commander Vorn's voice remained steady. "Because the energy readings are unlike anything we've encountered in 2 centuries of exploration. Whatever's at the core of Ravkar could revolutionize our understanding of—" "Or kill us all," interrupted Counselor Wei. "The Navari archives explicitly warn about this planet. They speak of creatures that awaken when the sun bleeds into the sky. Even they avoided it, and they conquered half the Orion arm before vanishing." Silas Ward sat at the far end of the table, saying nothing. His weathered face, marked with the distinctive scarring of someone who had survived multiple planetary environments, betrayed no emotion. But his eyes never left the projection of Ravkar. "We have the technology," Commander Vorn continued. "The new Pathfinder suits can withstand." "Technology failed us on Proxima Delta," Director Halloway said quietly. "Hundreds dead because we overestimated our capabilities." The room fell silent again. All eyes turned to Silas, who maintained his silence. "Mr. Ward," Director Halloway said finally, "you've been unusually quiet. As our most experienced terrain engineer and the only survivor of Proxima Delta, your input would be valuable." Silas looked up, his gray eyes revealing nothing. "I'll go." The room erupted in voices. "Alone?" Commander Vorn asked incredulously. "A single insertion point minimizes disruption," Silas said. "One person, one mission. Establish an automated survey beacon at the designated coordinates. In and out. If I fail, you've lost one man, not a team." "And if you succeed?" Director Halloway asked. Silas stood up. "Then you'll have your first real data on a Level 17 Deathworld." As the council descended into heated debate, Silas Ward returned his gaze to the swirling surface of Ravkar. In his mind, he saw the faces of those he couldn't save on Proxima Delta. Perhaps, he thought, this mission would finally give him a reason to continue living, or a worthy place to die. 3 weeks later, the dropship approached Ravkar's upper atmosphere. Through the viewport, Silas watched as the distant sun, a bloated red giant, cast an ominous glow across the planet's surface. His Pathfinder suit, a masterpiece of human engineering, hummed softly as its systems initialized. Final approach in 60 seconds. The ship's AI announced, "Pathfinder Ward, all diagnostics nominal. Survival probability remains at 7%. Silas nodded. "Acceptable. Launching deployment pod in 10 seconds. As the countdown reached 0, Silas closed his eyes. The pod disengaged from the dropship with a metallic clank, and immediately began its controlled descent toward the surface. The turbulence hit instantly. The pod shook violently as it tore through layers of atmosphere that seemed to fight against the intrusion. Through the small window, Silas watched as the sky transformed from black to deep crimson, then to a sickly orange. The legends weren't wrong. The sun indeed appeared to bleed into the sky here. Impact came harder than expected. The pod crashed through a canopy of what looked like trees but glistened like metal, before slamming into solid ground. Emergency shock absorbers deployed a millisecond too late, and Silas felt his body strain against the harness as the world spun and finally went dark. He awoke to the sound of his suit alarm. External breach detected. Atmosphere containment at 97%. Warning: local atmospheric composition includes 17 unknown compounds. Analyzing. Silas groaned and unbuckled himself from the harness. The pod had landed at a 45-degree angle, partially embedded in the ground. Through the cracked viewport, he could see what appeared to be a forest, if forests were made of twisted metal columns with pulsating blue veins running through them. Each tree ended in a crown of crystalline structures that caught the blood-red light and fragmented it into painful shards of color. Mission parameters unchanged, Silas muttered to himself, gathering the survey beacon components from their secured compartments. Establish the beacon. Activate it. Return to extraction point. Simple. He engaged his helmet seal and checked the Pathfinder suit's diagnostics one last time. The outer layer was already showing signs of corrosion from brief exposure to the atmosphere during landing. Deploying in 3, 2, 1. The pod door slid open with a hiss, and Ravkar's full assault hit him immediately. The gravity was 30% stronger than Earth standard, pressing down on him despite the suit's compensators. The air, what he could sense through his suit's external sensors, was thick with particles that seemed to cling to his visor like curious insects before dissolving into oily smears. Silas took his first step onto the surface of Ravkar. The ground beneath him wasn't soil, but a dense, fibrous material that yielded slightly before firming up, as if reacting to his weight. Commencing survey beacon deployment, he reported to the suit's recorder. Site appears to be some form of biomechanical forest, ground composition unknown. Proceeding to designated coordinates. The journey to the deployment site was only 2 kilometers, but in Ravkar's gravity and alien terrain, it might as well have been 20. Every step required conscious effort. The metallic trees seemed to shift slightly as he passed, their crystalline crowns turning to follow his movement. An hour later, Silas reached a clearing that matched the coordinates for the survey beacon. It was a perfectly circular depression in the otherwise chaotic landscape, as if something had intentionally created a space here. Beginning beacon assembly, Silas announced to his recorder. He removed the components from his pack and began the precise work of assembling the survey beacon, a 2-meter-tall device designed to drill into the planet's crust and establish a direct link to the orbiting satellite. As his gloved hands worked with practiced efficiency, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The beacon's primary spike extended with a mechanical whir, poised to drill into the surface. Silas activated the sequence and stepped back. The spike plunged downward with tremendous force, penetrating the fibrous ground. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire planet seemed to scream. A subsonic vibration rippled outward from the impact point, shaking Silas to his bones despite the suit's protection. The metallic trees around the clearing began to bend inward, their crystalline crowns shattering and raining deadly shards to the ground. The fibrous surface beneath his feet rippled like disturbed water. Seismic event detected, his suit warned unnecessarily. Magnitude unknown. Recommend immediate evacuation. But Silas stood transfixed as the beacon, still half embedded in the ground, began to sink, not into soil, but into what now appeared to be a quickly liquefying surface. Around the clearing's edge, the metal trees extended previously hidden appendages, long, barbed tendrils that whipped toward him with alarming speed. Native defense mechanism activated. Silas gasped into his recorder as he dove away from a tendril that nearly impaled his suit. The planet is responding to the beacon as if it were an invasion. He grabbed for the beacon, but it had already sunk too deep. His mission parameters flashed in his mind. Without the beacon, there would be no data, no justification for the risk, no redemption for Proxima Delta. A tendril wrapped around his leg and yanked him off his feet. As he hit the ground, his communication array, mounted on his back, shattered against a crystalline shard. His connection to the orbiting satellite, his only link to humanity, went dead. Silas Ward was now completely alone on Ravkar. With desperate strength, he activated his suit's emergency plasma cutter and severed the tendril holding him. A viscous blue fluid sprayed from the cut, sizzling against his suit's outer layer. The tendril recoiled, writhing like a wounded snake. "Need to retreat," Silas muttered, scrambling to his feet. "Regroup, reassess." He ran, abandoning the mission parameters for the more immediate goal of survival. The metal forest had fully awakened now, every tree bending and reaching for him as he passed. The ground beneath him pulsated, sometimes hardening to slow his progress, sometimes softening to try to engulf his feet. As the blood-red sun began to set, casting long shadows through the crystal-crowned trees, Silas found a small cave formed by what appeared to be massive, fossilized rib cages jutting from the ground. He squeezed inside, his breathing ragged inside his helmet. "Day 1 on Ravkar," he recorded, his voice shaking slightly. "Mission compromised. Survey beacon lost. Communications array destroyed. Survival now primary objective until extraction in 49 days. He ran a diagnostic on his suit. The outer layer had been compromised in several places, the corrosive atmosphere already eating through the secondary layer. His oxygen recyclers were operating at 80% efficiency. Power reserves were stable, but with the damaged outer layer, solar recharging would be less effective. "I have 49 days to survive on a planet that's actively trying to kill me," he said with grim determination. "Not the worst odds I've faced." As darkness fell completely, Silas activated his suit's night vision. What he saw made his blood run cold. Outside the cave, moving with deliberate slowness through the metal forest, was a creature unlike anything in humanity's expansive xenobiological database. It stood nearly 4 meters tall, with a body that seemed to phase in and out of visibility, where it should have had a face. There was only a swirling vortex of what looked like liquid light. Its limbs, Silas counted 6, ended not in hands or claws, but in what appeared to be complex, organic tools that constantly reshaped themselves. "You're the invisible hunter," Silas whispered, recalling the Navari archives, the creature that awakens when the sun bleeds into the sky. The hunter paused, its vortex face turning slowly toward Silas's hiding place. For a heart-stopping moment, Silas was certain it had detected him. Then, a distant sound, like metal being torn, drew its attention away. It moved off with surprising grace, its semi-visible form melting into the darkness of the forest. Silas released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. 49 days, he repeated to himself. "I just need to survive 49 days. But as the night deepened, the metal trees began to release a fine mist that crept along the ground and seeped into his cave. His suit's sensors screamed warnings as the mist touched the damaged sections of his armor. "Toxic compound detected," the suit announced. "Composition unknown. Corrosive properties exceeding safety parameters." Silas felt a burning sensation where the mist had found a breach in his suit. He quickly sealed the tear with emergency patches, but not before the toxic substance had made contact with his skin. The pain was immediate and intense, like being branded with a hot iron. The plants!" he gasped, understanding dawning through the pain. "They're not just responding, they're actively hunting." That first night set the pattern for what would follow. Ravkar was not merely a hostile environment, it was an environment that adapted its hostility specifically to counter Silas's presence. When he found a way to neutralize the toxic mist using his suit's chemical countermeasures, the trees began to emit a different compound. When he developed protection against the tendril attacks, the ground itself became the predator, forming pitfalls lined with crystalline spikes. By the 5th day, Silas had established a precarious routine. He moved only during the planet's brief twilight periods, when the invisible hunters seemed less active. He had discovered that certain blue-veined areas of the metal trees were less toxic than others and could be cut open to reveal a moisture-rich pulp that his suit could filter into drinkable water. He avoided clearings, kept to high ground when possible, and maintained constant vigilance against the ever-changing threats. His suit was deteriorating faster than anticipated. The outer layer was now completely compromised, the secondary layer failing in multiple sections. He had resorted to creating makeshift patches from the hardened resin that sometimes formed on the metal trees after rainfall, a rainfall that hissed and steamed when it hit the ground. On the 7th day, as he was harvesting water from a blue vein, Silas sensed rather than heard a presence behind him. He whirled, his improvised spear, fashioned from a crystalline shard bound to a metal tendril, at the ready. What he saw defied his expectations. Standing just beyond arm's reach was a humanoid figure, not human, but humanoid in the broadest sense. It stood on 2 legs and had 2 arms, but its body appeared to be composed of the same fibrous material as the ground, interwoven with metallic strands and pulsing blue veins. Its face was featureless except for 2 deep indentations where eyes might be, glowing with the same liquid light as the invisible hunters. Silas raised his spear higher. "Stay back," he warned, though he doubted the creature could understand him. To his shock, the being responded in a voice that sounded like metal being drawn across crystal, harsh, but with distinct patterns that resolved into recognizable speech. "You are not dead," it said. Interesting. Silas maintained his defensive posture, but lowered his spear slightly. "You speak my language?" "I speak all languages." The being replied, "I am Lirathun. I observe." "Observe what?" "You, the intruder, the test subject." Silas's grip tightened on his spear. "I'm not a test subject. I'm a Pathfinder from Earth." "Earth," Lirathun repeated, the word sounding strange in its crystalline voice. "We know of Earth, a world of soft beings who reach beyond their understanding. We came to study this planet," Silas explained cautiously. "To learn." "No," Lirathun said with certainty. "You came to measure, to own. All outsiders seek to own." "I just want to survive," Silas admitted, "to make it to extraction." Lirathun moved closer, its fibrous body flexing in ways that seemed impossible for its apparent structure. "Ravkar has awakened because of you. The ancient will stirs. You are being tested. Earth being. Tested for what?" "Worthiness." Before Silas could ask more, Lirathun turned and walked away, its body seeming to merge with the metal trees as it passed among them. "Wait!" Silas called. "Tested how? By whom?" But Lirathun was gone, leaving Silas with more questions than answers. That night, as he huddled in a new shelter, a hollow formed by 3 metal trees that had grown together, Silas reviewed his encounter with Lirathun. The being had spoken of an ancient will and suggested that the planet itself was testing him. It aligned with what he had observed, the environment's seemingly intelligent responses to his actions. If the planet is conscious, he recorded, then survival may depend on communication, not just adaptation. The next day, Silas began to move with new purpose. Rather than simply reacting to threats, he started to observe patterns more closely. He noticed that when he harvested water from the blue veins with care, making clean cuts and taking only what he needed, the trees were less likely to release their toxic mist. When he repaired damage he had caused to the environment, such as carefully resealing cuts in the veins, the ground beneath him seemed more stable. Lirathun appeared again on the 10th day, watching silently as Silas methodically placed crystalline shards back into the formation from which he had taken one for a tool. "You learn," Lirathun observed. Silas nodded without looking up from his work. "I'm trying to understand. Understanding is rare among outsiders. I need to reach the core of this planet," Silas said, finally turning to face the being. "My mission was to establish a survey beacon, but now I need to understand what this place is." Lirathun's light-filled eye pits seemed to brighten. "The core is the heart of ancient speech. None who enter return unchanged." "Will you guide me there?" Silas asked. "I do not guide, I observe, but I will not hinder one who seeks understanding rather than possession." In the days that followed, Silas noticed that Lirathun would appear at seemingly random intervals, always watching, never helping directly. But after each appearance, Silas would discover something useful, a path through particularly dangerous terrain, a new source of water, or a warning sign of approaching invisible hunters. By the 20th day, Silas had penetrated deeper into Ravkar's interior than any probe had managed. The metal forest had given way to vast plains of what appeared to be circuitry made of living tissue. The ground pulsed with energy that his suit's sensors couldn't identify. The blood-red sun seemed larger here, its light filtered through clouds that formed patterns too regular to be natural. His suit was now little more than a frame with patches of remaining protective material. He had augmented it with layers of the resin and fibrous ground material, creating a hybrid armor that was less effective against the atmosphere but better at resisting the specific threats of Ravkar. His oxygen recyclers were failing, forcing him to adapt to breathing the toxic air in carefully measured intervals. On the 25th day, as he crossed a field of what looked like enormous circuit boards growing from the ground, the earth beneath him suddenly gave way. Silas fell into darkness, tumbling down a shaft that seemed to have opened specifically to receive him. He landed hard on a surface that yielded slightly before firming up, the same response he had felt when first stepping onto Ravkar. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, he realized he was in a vast underground chamber. The walls pulsed with blue light flowing through vein-like channels. The ceiling, far above, was a network of crystalline formations that refracted the little light that penetrated from above. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing strangely. "You have reached the first threshold," came Lirathun's voice from the darkness. The being stepped forward, but something had changed. Its form was more defined now, almost solid, and the light in its eye pits had resolved into actual eyes, still glowing, but recognizably eyes. "What is this place?" Silas asked. "A synapse of the ancient will," Lirathun replied. "One of many pathways to the heart. And what will I find there? Truth, judgment, perhaps death?" Silas looked around the chamber, noting that there appeared to be only one exit, a tunnel leading deeper into the planet, its walls lined with the same pulsing blue veins. "Why have you been helping me?" he asked suddenly. "You said you only observe." I observe all who come, Lirathun clarified. Few survive the observation. Fewer still warrant more. And I do. You learn. You adapt. You respect. These are rare qualities in outsiders. Silas nodded slowly. The heart of ancient speech. How much farther? Distance is meaningless here. It is not how far you travel, but how deeply you understand. With those cryptic words, Lirathun stepped back into the shadows and vanished. Silas stood alone in the chamber for a long moment, considering his options. His extraction was scheduled for 24 days from now. If he turned back, he might reach the landing site in time, but with no data, no beacon, nothing to show for the mission or the risk. But if he continued toward the heart, forward, he decided aloud. Always forward. The tunnel beyond the chamber descended at a gentle slope, curving in ways that made it impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. As Silas progressed, he noticed changes in the environment. The gravity fluctuated subtly, sometimes lightening enough that he felt he might float away, sometimes increasing until his knees threatened to buckle. The air, too, changed, from the corrosive mixture of the surface to something thicker, richer, but no less alien. On what he calculated to be the 30th day since landing, Silas encountered his first major obstacle in the underground journey. The tunnel ended abruptly at a vast chasm, too wide to jump and too deep to see the bottom. Across the gap, the tunnel continued, tantalizing in its proximity yet unreachable. As he stood contemplating the problem, the walls around him began to pulse more rapidly, the blue light brightening. The ground beneath his feet softened, then began to flow like liquid, carrying him to the edge of the chasm. Is this a test?" Silas asked aloud. "Or are you finally tired of the intruder?" In response, a section of the wall detached itself, reshaping into a familiar form, Lirathun, but changed again. Now the being appeared almost fully solid, its previously featureless face showing hints of a mouth, a nose, distinct eyes that glowed less intensely. "All is test," Lirathun said, from first breath to last. "I can't cross this." Silas gestured to the chasm. "Can't you?" Silas looked again at the gap. It remained as wide, as impassable as before. "No," he said with certainty. "I can't fly. I can't jump that far. It's impossible." "Impossible for what you are." Lirathun agreed. "But what could you become?" Before Silas could respond, Lirathun stepped to the edge of the chasm and simply walked forward into empty air. But instead of falling, the being continued forward as if on solid ground, blue light trailing from its feet to form a glowing path that hung in the air. "The ancient will responds to understanding," Lirathun said from midway across the chasm. "Not to force, not to technology, but to understanding." With that, the being continued to the other side and disappeared into the tunnel beyond. Silas stood at the edge, looking at the now empty air where Lirathun had walked. "Understanding," he repeated, "not force." He thought about his observations over the past 30 days, how the planet responded to care rather than exploitation, how the ground seemed to react to his intentions as much as his actions, how the very atmosphere changed based on his approach to the environment. Taking a deep breath, Silas stepped to the very edge of the chasm. "I understand," he said to the planet around him. "I understand that I am not master here. I am guest. I seek knowledge, not possession. I come with respect, not demand." He closed his eyes and took a step forward, expecting to plummet into the depths. Instead, his foot met resistance, not solid ground, but something that supported his weight nonetheless. He opened his eyes to see blue light spreading from where his foot touched what appeared to be empty air, forming a narrow path that extended only as far as his next step. Hardly daring to breathe, Silas took another step. Again. The light path extended just ahead of him. Another step, another extension of the path. Halfway across, suspended above an abyss of unknown depth, Silas allowed himself a moment of wonder. It's responding to my intent, he realized, to my understanding. When he reached the other side, the light path behind him faded, leaving no evidence that it had ever existed. The tunnel ahead pulsed with blue light, as if beckoning him forward. The journey continued this way for days that blurred together in Silas's perception. He faced challenges that tested not his physical abilities or technological resources, but his comprehension and adaptability. Chambers that rearranged themselves like puzzles, passages that responded to spoken truths, obstacles that yielded only to patience or humility. And always, Lyra Thune appeared periodically, watching, sometimes offering cryptic guidance, becoming more defined and humanoid with each appearance. By what Silas calculated to be the 40th day, he had reached a region of Ravkar that defied all scientific understanding. The laws of physics seemed optional here. Gravity pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. Light behaved as both particle and wave in visible ways. Time stretched and compressed, sometimes leaving Silas feeling as if hours had passed in what his suit's chronometer claimed were minutes. "The heart is near," Lyra Thune said, appearing beside him as he navigated a corridor where the floor, walls, and ceiling constantly shifted positions. The being now looked almost completely solid, its features distinct and expressive, though still clearly non-human. "What will I find there?" Silas asked for what felt like the 100th time. But now, Lyra Thune gave a different answer. The truth of Ravkar, the purpose of the ancient will, and judgment. Judgment for what? For all that you are, all that you have been, all that your kind might become. Before Silas could question further, the corridor ahead opened into a vast spherical chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it extended into spaces his eyes couldn't properly process, while other sections seemed to fold in on themselves in impossible geometries. At the center of the chamber floated what appeared to be a massive, pulsating organ, not biological in any conventional sense, but undeniably alive. It was a complex structure of crystalline formations, metallic veins, and flowing energy that reminded Silas of a brain, a heart, and a quantum computer combined into one impossible entity. "The heart of ancient speech," Lyra Thune announced, voice reverent. As Silas stepped into the chamber, the heart pulsed more rapidly, sending waves of blue energy outward that washed over him like physical force. His damaged suit's sensors went haywire, registering readings that made no scientific sense. "What happens now?" Silas asked, his voice small in the vast space. "Now," Lyra Thune said, "you are known." Without warning, tendrils of blue energy shot from the heart, enveloping Silas completely. He felt no pain, but a sensation of being simultaneously disassembled and examined at levels far beyond the physical. And then, the memories came. Not just his own memories, but memories processed through the alien consciousness of Ravkar. He saw himself as a child, fearful of the darkness. But the darkness was alive with curious intelligence. He saw his training as a Pathfinder, his pride in his skills. But that pride was examined by something that had existed for eons and found it quaint yet charming. He relived Proxima Delta, the mission that had haunted him for years. The colony in distress, the terrain collapse that trapped hundreds, his desperate efforts to save them, the choices he had made that resulted in some living while others died, the guilt that had driven him to volunteer for this suicide mission to Ravkar. But now he experienced those memories with a new perspective, seeing the impossible situation for what it was, understanding that his choices, while imperfect, had been made with the best intentions and information available to him. The judgment of the memory species. Lyra Thune's voice echoed in his mind. To be known completely. Silas felt himself laid bare before the consciousness of Ravkar, his fears, his failures, his small moments of cruelty and selfishness, his capacity for sacrifice and compassion, nothing hidden, nothing disguised. Then came the questions, not in words, but in concepts that bloomed directly in his mind. Why do you seek? What do you value? What would you sacrifice? What do you fear? What do you love? What is humanity? What might humanity become? The questions weren't academic or philosophical. They were experiential. Each one forced Silas to live through scenarios that tested his answers in visceral ways. He experienced futures where humanity conquered and destroyed, where humanity uplifted and preserved, where humanity vanished or transcended. Through it all, Silas clung to one core truth that had guided him through his life. That understanding was more valuable than control. That connection mattered more than conquest. That the universe was not something to be owned, but something to be experienced and cherished. How long the examination lasted, he couldn't tell. It might have been moments or days in objective time, when awareness of his physical self returned. Silas found himself on his knees before the heart, which now pulsed with a gentler rhythm. Lyra Thune stood beside him, a hand, now fully formed and solid, resting on his shoulder. "You have been judged," Lyra Thune said. Silas looked up, exhausted beyond words. "And? You have been found interesting. Despite everything." Silas laughed, a sound of relief and genuine amusement. "Interesting? That's it?" "It is more than any outsider has achieved before," Lyra Thune said, the being's face now capable of expressions that looked almost like a smile. "The ancient will has seen what you are, what your kind might be. It finds potential." "Potential for what?" "For growth, for understanding, for symbiosis rather than exploitation." The heart pulsed, and the chamber around them shifted, pathways opening and closing until a single corridor remained, leading upward. "The way back is opened," Lyra Thune said. "Your extraction approaches." Silas stood shakily, his suit, now little more than tatters, held together by Ravkar's resin and his own ingenuity. What was this place built for? Who created the ancient will? "Those who came before," Lyra Thune answered. "Those who saw the Star Hunters coming and prepared a guardian." "Star Hunters?" "Those who consume worlds without understanding them, who take without giving, who destroy without creating." Lyra Thune gestured to the heart. The ancient will was created to judge those who might one day reach this world, to test their worthiness. And if they're found wanting, then Ravkar remains a Deathworld, impenetrable, unconquerable. And if they're found worthy, Lyra Thune's almost smile widened. Then gifts might be given, knowledge shared, symbiosis achieved. The heart pulsed again, more strongly, and a beam of concentrated blue energy shot out, enveloping Silas. He felt his cells resonating with the energy, changing in subtle ways he couldn't comprehend. When the beam retracted, a small crystalline object floated before him, a data core, but unlike any human technology. "A gift," Lyra Thune explained. knowledge of symbiotic technologies, ways to grow with worlds rather than consume them, the beginning of understanding. Silas reached out and took the crystal, which felt warm and somehow alive in his hand. "Thank you," he said, both to Lirathun and to the heart, to Ravkar itself. "The path is clear," Lirathun said, gesturing to the corridor. "But know this, Silas Ward of Earth, you have been changed by Ravkar, as all are who truly know it. The ancient will has touched you. You will never be what you once were." Silas nodded, feeling the truth of those words in his very cells. Something had changed within him, a connection, a resonance with this world that would remain with him always. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "I am Ravkar," Lirathun said simply. "I am everywhere here, and now, in small ways, I am with you also." With that, Lirathun's form began to dissolve, returning to the walls and floor of the chamber, becoming one with the heart once more. Silas turned and began the journey back, the crystal secure in a makeshift pouch. The path that had taken 40 days to navigate now seemed to unfold before him in ways that defied space and time. Chambers that had been puzzles now opened directly onto new passages. Chasms that had tested his understanding now had bridges of solid light. The very atmosphere of Ravkar, once toxic to his human physiology, now seemed less hostile, or perhaps he had been changed to better withstand it. On the 49th day since his landing, exactly as scheduled, Silas emerged from what had once been a metal forest but now appeared to him as a complex, living communication network. The extraction point was just ahead, a clearing where the dropship would descend to retrieve him. As he waited, Silas reflected on his journey. He had come to Ravkar seeking data, or perhaps death. He had found something far more profound, understanding, not just of this world, but of himself, of humanity's place in the cosmos, of the potential for connection rather than conquest. The dropship appeared as a speck in the blood-red sky, growing larger as it descended. Silas stood tall despite his tattered appearance, the crystal from the heart warm against his chest. When the ship landed, the recovery team emerged in full hazard suits, weapons ready, prepared to find nothing but remains, if anything at all. Their shock at seeing Silas standing calmly in the clearing was evident even through their visored helmets. "Pathfinder Ward," the team leader asked incredulously. "You're alive?" Silas nodded. "Mission accomplished," he said simply. "But your suit, the atmosphere should have—" "Ravkar and I came to an understanding," Silas replied with a small smile. As they led him to the dropship, one of the team members scanned him with handheld equipment. "Sir, these readings, they're impossible. Your cellular structure shows signs of— I don't even know what this is." "It's symbiosis," Silas explained, "a gift from the heart of ancient speech." The team exchanged confused glances as they secured him in the dropship. The crystal from the heart, when discovered during decontamination procedures, defied all analysis. It contained data structures unlike anything in human technological experience, organic computing on a level that would take decades to begin understanding. In the debriefing chamber of the Interstellar Exploration Council, Silas sat once again at the far end of the table. The holographic projection in the center now showed not just Ravkar, but also the inexplicable readings from his changed biology and the crystal he had brought back. "You're telling us," Director Halloway said slowly, "that the planet is alive, conscious, that it judged you and found humanity." "Interesting." "Yes," Silas confirmed. "Ravkar is a guardian world, created by an ancient civilization to protect against those who would exploit rather than understand. It tests those who approach it. And this crystal contains technology? Technology we can use? Commander Vorn asked, her eyes fixed on the projection of the crystal's complex internal structure. Not technology we can use, Silas corrected. Technology we can learn from. Ways to grow with worlds rather than consume them. Symbiotic approaches rather than extractive ones. This could revolutionize our entire approach to colonization, Counselor Wei murmured. If we could grow habitats that function as extensions of planets rather than impositions upon them. Exactly, Silas nodded. But it requires a fundamental shift in perspective, understanding rather than control, partnership rather than ownership. Director Holloway leaned forward. And you believe Ravkar would allow further missions, now that you've passed its test? Silas considered this for a moment, feeling the subtle resonance within him, the connection to Ravkar that remained even across the vastness of space. I believe, he said carefully, that Ravkar doesn't want to kill us. It only wants to know if we're worthy of existence. As the council erupted into excited discussion about the implications and possibilities, Silas looked down at his hands. In the right light, he could almost see blue veins pulsing beneath his skin, a reminder of the heart of ancient speech, of the gift and the responsibility he now carried. Humanity had been judged and found interesting. Now they had the chance to prove they could be more, partners rather than conquerors, students rather than masters, worthy of the stars they sought to explore. Ravkar was waiting and watching,